that what I must do would be to get all of the strength that I could, because the mere fact that I had reached the conclusion was not very significant, because the decision really lay with President Johnson.
Clifford said, I noticed you this afternoon at the State Department, and it seems to me you and I are on the same side. And I think we should form a partnership. You should be the partner in the White House, and I'll be the partner in the Pentagon. You tell me what goes on over there that you hear, and I'll tell you what happens over here. And together, we'll get this country and our president out of this mess.
Harry was our secret dove. Harry was very close to the president. Harry and I were close. Harry was close to other members of the White House staff.
We began to develop a group, and I know that after a while the question would be very secretly, is he with us? That means, is he part of this group that is organized and dedicated to changing Lyndon Johnson's mind? It was almost like some very similar expression used in the French Revolution. Is he with us?
Without his having to say so, getting us out of this mess did not mean putting in another 200,000 or 300,000 men in order to beat North Vietnam, the Viet Cong. It meant to begin the process of de-escalation, as it was called, of disengagement of the United States. I was exhilarated.
On March 10th, the New York Times revealed the Pentagon's request for additional troops. The request had been a closely guarded secret. The disclosure stunned members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, then holding hearings on Vietnam. Secretary of State Dean Rusk was grilled on live television for 2 days.
There is incipient uprising in this country in opposition to this war, and it's going to get worse. This talk about sending over 100,000 to 200,000 more troops, you're going to create a very serious difficulty in this country if you people in the administration go through with that.
Now, Mr. Secretary, for some years we have been bombing the North. As I understand it, this bombing of the North had three purposes. One, to hurt North Vietnam. That's been done. Secondly, to stop the infiltration of men down across the Parallel and the Ho Chi Minh trails. Has that been done?
It has not been stopped completely, Senator, and we never supposed that it could stop it completely. But we do know that it has had some major impact upon the capacity of the other side to carry out this infiltration, and has cost him very heavily.
The rate of infiltration in 1965 was about 1,500 a month. In 1966, about 4,500 a month. In 1967, between 5,500 and 6,000 a month. And in 1968, it's my understanding that in January, 20,000 men came down from North Vietnam into South Vietnam. Is that a correct figure or a correct estimate?
I would accept those as approximately correct, sir.
Mm-hmm. Then the third factor, in addition to hurt, reducing infiltration, the third factor was to bring Hanoi to the conference table. Are they any closer to the conference table now than they were when the bombing began?
We have seen no evidence that they're prepared to undertake serious discussions toward a peaceful settlement of this situation.
Senators Morse and Mansfield had long opposed the war. But after Tet, supporters like Senator Carl Munt of South Dakota began to abandon Johnson.
One who has consistently supported the decision of the administration to stay on and press on with this war, I am totally and sorrowfully disappointed by your answer. And I think this is one of the great causes for dissension in this country.
Now Congress wanted a change, either victory or withdrawal. Congress, also concerned about the cost of the war, forced Johnson to trim his domestic programs. He could not spend more on a limited war, and he feared an expanded war.
Johnson's greatest fear, as he once put it, was that an American pilot was going to miss his target in Hanoi or Haiphong Harbor and put a bomb down the smokestack of a Russian freighter with the Russian minister on board, and that the pilot would be from Johnson City, Texas. He was he was extremely disturbed that we might provoke the Russians, or earlier the Chinese, into coming to the aid of Vietnam. And that was one of the tremendous dilemmas he had throughout the war, when a great many Americans wanted the United States to go ahead and finish it off.
Johnson also had to consider the war at home. Until then, he had dismissed street demonstrations. But 1968 was a presidential election year, and out of the growing anti-war sentiment, there emerged a peace candidate, thrust into prominence by the shock of the Tet Offensive.
I am a candidate for the nomination of the presidency on the Democratic ticket. I run for that office against an incumbent leader of our party because I believe, as I find many people in this country do believe now and have for the last 5 or 6 months, that we are involved in a very deep crisis of leadership, a crisis of direction, and a crisis of national purpose. And the entire history of this war in Vietnam, no matter what we call it, has been one of continued error and of misjudgment.
Senator Eugene McCarthy nearly beat Johnson in the New Hampshire primary, and the close vote jolted Johnson. At the time, it looked like a vote for peace. In fact, it was a vote against Johnson's conduct of the war. Many New Hampshire voters felt that he wasn't being tough enough. They favored getting out of a war he refused to win.
Johnson was further rattled when Robert Kennedy joined the presidential race. The glamorous Kennedys had always worried him. Robert had switched to a peace platform, and Johnson smelled defeat in Wisconsin the next primary. A faraway war was taking its toll at home. Johnson turned to a group of elder statesmen called the Wise Men. They had consistently backed his war policies. He convened them on March 25th. They included establishment figures like former Secretary of State Dean Acheson, former Ambassador to Vietnam Maxwell Taylor, and former National Security Advisor McGeorge Bundy.
And our recommendation, on the whole, not without dissent, disagreement, was that there should not be an increase in force levels in South Vietnam, and that there should be a modification of the policy of bombing North Vietnam.
Now, here was a group saying, Mr. President, stop trying to win the war, start cutting back, don't send any more men, we think you ought to get out. It was a very bitter pill for him.
I think he had himself decided, really, that he would not do the ground force reinforcement. So it was more our gloominess, in a way, than our specific recommendations that he may have found troubling.
To meet price increases in the cost of...
On the afternoon of March 31st, after 2 months of indecision, Johnson rehearsed an address to the nation, scheduled for that evening.
One of those additional expenditures is, so get Clifford and see what figures. In this fiscal year, well, you're going to have to get them in the next hour so you can mimeograph it, because George is going to want. In this fiscal year and...
As late as March 28th, his aides were still divided on Vietnam policy.
It was a strong, we will be in there, we will be fighting, they will not drive us out, we will save Vietnam speech. There was a meeting in Secretary Rusk's office. Rusk, Clifford, Bill Bundy, the Assistant Secretary for the Far East, Rostow, and me. Clifford said, the speech is a disaster.
I thought the draft was dreadful. I thought that it was harsh. I thought that it talked about the continuation of the war. It talked about Tet, how Tet could be resolved. There was some suggestion about sending some of the men, not the whole 206,000. To me, it needed much changing and much amendment.
The really surprising thing was that Rusk and Rostow did not fight Clifford on that, but began to speak as if, all right, what do we have to put in line to write a different kind of speech? I went back and wrote a different speech, a very different speech.
As a quick illustration, the first few sentences of that speech in the original draft said, "I wish to talk about the war in Vietnam." That was the first sentence. By the time the speech was written and rewritten, we worked days on it before it was given, the first sentence read,
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Tonight I want to speak to you of peace in Vietnam and Southeast Asia.
And that speech was almost a complete reversal of what the speech started out to be.
Tonight I have ordered our aircraft and our naval vessels to make no attacks on North Vietnam, except in the area north of the demilitarized zone where the continuing enemy buildup directly threatens Allied forward positions and where the movement of their troops and supplies are clearly related to that threat.
I had cut off the peroration, the ending of the speech, which was a kind of McPherson effort to write Churchillian. It had been on every draft of every speech from the beginning. Clifford called me just before we met on that Saturday and said, you know, that peroration doesn't belong there anymore. The speech has changed. You can't make the kind of speech we've now got and then end it with the sort of we will fight them in the lanes and the villages and the beaches language that is in that peroration. So I just cut it off. I didn't have time to write a new one. Johnson asked me, where was it? I liked that. And I said, well, I didn't like it. Doesn't really fit with the speech. I'll go upstairs and write a new one. And I'll make it short because the speech is already a very long one. He said, you don't need to worry about time. I may have a little ending of my own. And he walked out of the room, leaving me and Clifford. I turned around to Clifford and said, good Lord, is he going to say sayonara? Is he going to quit? And Clifford looked at me as if I were out of my mind.
We'd all assumed, of course, that he would run. He loved the job. He reveled in it.
About 5 in the afternoon, I got back to my office, and Johnson called me and asked me what I thought about the speech that he was about to deliver in 2 or 3 hours. And I said I thought it was pretty good. I was really proud and glad that we had changed the speech. He said, I've got an ending. I said, I've heard that. He said, do you know what's in it? I said, I think so. And he said, what do you think about it? I said, I'm very sorry, Mr. President. And he said, okay, so long, partner.
With American sons in the field far away, with America's future under challenge right here at home, with our hopes and the world's hopes for peace and the balance every day, I do not believe that I should devote an hour or a day of my time to any personal partisan causes or to any duties other than the awesome duties of this office, the presidency of your country. Accordingly, I shall not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
As promptly as possible after he spoke, I had a press conference and announced formally that the 206,000 troops were not to be sent.
This is part and parcel, I believe, of the President's decision to place a limitation at this time upon our troop level at a point not exceeding 550,000.
It seemed appropriate that it should be said, if that's what he meant, and I assumed that that was what he meant from the tone of his speech on March the 31st. There were still those who very much wanted to. The military still thought the matter was hanging fire. That ended it. After that statement was made publicly, there was no further comment about the 206,000 troops.
The Tet Offensive had a further impact. In mid-May, North Vietnamese diplomats arrived in Paris to talk for the first time. That week, the Viet Cong launched a new offensive. Americans fought on for the same objective, an independent South Vietnam. But after Tet, the strategy changed. There were peace talks and the slow withdrawal of American troops. The talking and fighting went on for the next 5 years.
American Experience is made possible by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation to enhance public understanding of the role of technology. The foundation also seeks to portray the lives of the men and women engaged in scientific and technological pursuit.
At Liberty Mutual Insurance, we do everything we can to help prevent accidents and make America a safer place. Liberty Mutual is proud to support American Experience.
At the Scotts Company, we help make gardens more beautiful, lawns greener, trees taller. If there's a better business to be in, please let us know.
American Experience is also made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. Major funding for this program was provided by the National Endowment for the Humanities.
We are PBS.